one of the dimensions of the Myers-Briggs type indicator is extrovert-introvert. That isn't whether you're a party animal or not, because actually sometimes at a party you can't tell the difference between an introvert and an extrovert, and that surprises some people. What the difference is, it's how that person feels at the end of the party. Because the extrovert will be energized by meeting all those people, but the introvert will be exhausted by meeting all those people. That's just so you understand. I tend to be more of an extrovert. Would you say, Tundi? Kind of. My wife Esther, she tends to be more of an introvert. So when I get home on a Friday night, well, I'm here on Friday night, but normally when I get home on a Friday night, I'm pumped up from a week of energy, and I'm loud and noisy, and I make a fuss about everything. And I have to learn to be responsive, and I have to moderate myself. And with my wife, I have to turn the volume down a little bit. I have another friend, very dear friend, and when I'm with him, do you know what I have to do? I have to turn the volume up! I'm not saying be something other than who you are, but a responsive person learns to adapt to serve the people around them. You're responsive to personality and to temperament. It's no good communicating to an accountant in pictures. You need to communicate to an accountant with numbers. Let's take another example. Communication preferences, personality and temperament. What about leadership? There's a number of theories of leadership. They call it trait-based leadership, where they say good leaders are X, Y, Z, A, B, C. If you have all these things, you're a good leader. Pretty blunt instrument, if you ask me. Another approach to leadership is what they call situational leadership or contextual leadership, because the leadership style depends upon the situational context. Okay? So, I just came back from Ghana, I flew back overnight on Tuesday night. I didn't want a consultative pilot. I didn't want the pilot to walk down the plane and say, when shall I take off and how much throttle shall I use, and could you come up to the cockpit and see if I'm coming in on the right trajectory for landing? I like a pilot who has more of a command and control approach to leadership. I tell you when I do like consultative leadership, when I go and see the doctor, which isn't very often, thankfully, I don't want to walk into the surgery and my doctor turn to me and say, there's your prescription. I haven't said anything yet. I want a doctor who's going to sit and listen and ask questions and understand and consult with me and then make a diagnosis and make a prescription. You see, because different styles of leadership are appropriate in different situations. And responsive leaders know when to adopt a command and control approach. Responsive leaders know when to adopt a consultative and collaborative approach. And relational leaders know when to adopt a kind of laid-back, laissez-faire approach. This is what distinguishes good leaders and great leaders. It's this principle of responsiveness. Good leaders say this is always the right thing to do. Great leaders depends upon the situation and the moment and the person you're with. That's the difference. Love languages. I mean, perhaps not in a professional context, but certainly in our families. My daughter Matilda, she's 6. When I was saying goodbye to go to the airport last week, she said to me, "Daddy, will you bring me home a present?" And when I phoned from Ghana a couple of times and I spoke to Matilda, she said, "Daddy, have you got me a present yet?" See, some people, so there's 2 ladies in my life. My daughter loves presents and time. My wife is different. My wife likes helpful actions. She likes me to do practical things to help her. Then she feels loved. There's some nudging going on here. So some people like gifts, some people like quality time, physical touch, words of affirmation, acts of service. So it isn't good enough just to love the people we're close to. We have got to love them in their style of love. Because naturally, we love other people as we like to be loved. So I like words of affirmation. So everybody around me who I'm close to knows I love them because I tell them. But that's not how my wife hears me tell her I love her. The words she just says, "Oh, it's just words." It's acts of service. I've got to take the bin out to the garden. I've got to empty the sink. I've got to empty the dishwasher. I've got to take my underwear down and put it in the washing basket. I need to put the lid on the toothpaste. You know, I need to... Some conscience is going here. I know this is a very personal context of application of what I'm talking about, but it is exactly the same principle. Relational leadership is responsive to the people that we're with. And this is what distinguishes good leaders and great leaders. So I want to ask you a question. I'd like you to get into your pairs again, if you will. I'd like to ask you how you think you could become more responsive to the people around you. And I want you to come up with something very practical and tangible and real. How do you think you could become more responsive to the people around you? So 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and 3. Okay, off you go. Okay, who's going to have a... Who's going to... Oh, Yemi. Thank you.
I think to respond to someone, you need to show interest first. You need to show interest, in them, like, oh, you're willing to know them more. That's the first thing. Then the second thing is probably, you know, knowing their likes and dislikes, to enable you to respond very well to their needs. But that all depends on the other person, because there are some people, no matter what you do or no matter how you learn to respond to them, they don't care, they don't want to know you, and that's it.
Okay, so let's personalise this, Yemi. How are you going to respond to the likes and dislikes of the people around you? What are you going to do differently as a result of this conversation?
In knowing their likes and dislikes, I think the first thing is just to, it all depends on the way, what you have in mind or the kind of relationship you're trying to build. So, not on,
Give me an
you know,
example of one.
I don't know. I can't remember any now.
Pick somebody at work. How could you respond better to them?
Like I've worked with different kind of people in the past and even at present. I work with some difficult people, with cool-headed people as well, and even the tough ones that people think, oh, these are not good area. You don't go to them, you don't touch them, they are untouchable. Or, that kind of people. I try to, I relax and try to learn, a bit of them, or what they like and what they don't like. Because there are some people that people think they are hard to deal with, and in the actual fact, they are not actually hard to deal with. So those kind of people, I try to take my time to learn about them, so that in my response, I won't be stepping on their toes.
I'm going to push you a little bit.
Is it?
I'm going to push you a little bit,
Okay.
if I may. So you're talking, and it's legitimate, you're talking about the people that are sometimes difficult around you and how you might respond to that. Are you ever difficult?
Myself?
Yes.
No, actually. I'm not that difficult.
You're not. Okay. Are you married?
Yeah.
You are?
Yeah.
Ask your wife. Oh, he's half married. Oh, powerfully married. I thought half married. Engaged? What I'm asking us to do here is to be self-reflective. It's easy to reflect upon other people and how they might do things differently. What I'm saying is, how do we respond? How do we moderate ourselves and adapt ourselves to what's going on around us? Thank you, Yemi. I've pushed you. Forgive me. I'm going to do a little swap on the microphones. Thank you. Who else would like to go? Thanks for volunteering.
I think I don't know, I think it'll be quite similar to everybody else. I haven't heard what everybody else will say, but I would say to study them, to study the people or the person. I mean, that you're trying to be responsive to, because you can't really respond to someone if you don't really know how they're like.
Okay.
Or
So my question is, how can you, not they, how can you be more responsive to the people around you? What's going to change about you?
guess
What
I'll
are you
try
going to adapt?
harder.
Sorry?
Guess I could try harder.
And in what way? What can you try harder at?
She was saying responding to my email, for example. I never check my email. I guess I don't know.
That
I
was
try.
wrong, wasn't it?
I guess I could try harder just to be. It sounds weird to say try harder to be responsive because that's your question. I guess make more of an effort I guess I don't know. I kind of maybe I give up easily,
Okay.
or I just think, oh, I've tried enough. That's fine. I'm gonna move on now.
That that is powerful. Because that's the difference between being an initiator and an imitator. Some people said, "Oh, I've phoned them once or twice or 3 times. I've reached out to them 5 times. They've not responded. That's it now." Or, "I thought they were my friend. Why am I always the one that has to phone them? They never phone me." Perhaps you're an initiator and they're an imitator. So I think what you've reflected is very powerful for you. Because if you're not the person if you don't give up, if you try a bit harder, you put yourself in the place of being intentional and deliberate where others might not bother. It's very powerful. Thank you. Who else would like a go? I'm not going to get very many volunteers. Oh, I am. Thank you, Glory.
I'm thinking of considering the weaknesses and strengths because you give room to people and you consider that everybody has got their weaknesses and strengths and each person according to his or her weakness and strength and you deal with them such.
Okay. So how could you moderate yourself in response to the people around you?
Well, an example is just what you've just said in terms of probably somebody calling you. You've been ringing somebody and there hasn't been any response and you just reflect and say why should you keep ringing or trying to get in touch and there isn't any response. You tend to want to stop. But sometimes actually it goes the other way because it might be eventually you might happen to get in touch with the person and there are excuses which could look cogent why he or she has not responded. So I think it just goes 2 ways.
So there might have been a reason they didn't respond.
Yeah. Maybe they traveled, somebody died,
And if you'd given up, then what might have happened?
well, it looks like you don't care, and you tend to close the gap. You tend not to close the gap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how could you change the way that you think and behave?
Well, somehow you try to keep the relationship again and see what goes on in future. I think at some stage you'll be able to decide whether the person is interested in keeping a relationship with you or not.
And how do you keep going?
With the same person.
Yeah.
It's just monitoring and communication, and it's either by phone or by email and texting, and then you watch his or her response.
Okay.
I think what I'm trying to say, there are things that are not just static. There are things that varies, flexible. There are times you don't judge people just bam. You give room. That's what I'm trying to do in life.
You give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yes.
Because we don't always know
Yes,
what's going on in somebody's
exactly.
life.
That's what I'm
And
trying
so if
to
they
say.
behave, or if they don't respond, or if they behave irrationally or out of character, there's probably a backstage reason why they're doing that.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Jay.
I have kind of like a question. but at the same time, it's kind of like an observation because I have a friend, and for a while, it felt like we really didn't have anything to talk about until it felt like at another time it felt like okay, now these are the things that this person is interested in, and when we started to talk about those things, yes, it felt like the friendship kind of grew. So would it be appropriate to say like in seeking to understand people to find what their interests are and then to build on that? Because one way to look at that would be, oh, it's all right. Another way to look at that would be kind of like the problem from networking, which would be because there is a mutual interest, and that's it would only last as long as that mutual interest exists. So my question is, would it be appropriate to build on the knowledge of the fact that some people are interested in certain things, and to pick up from there or not?
Quick answer, yes. Longer answer, um, that's why we have clubs and associations of people who get together with like motorbikes or cars or particular sports, or people like to be with others who share their interest. And often in those shared interest groups, people build deep friendships. And so it's hard to, you can't, if somebody else loves vintage cars and you love vintage cars and you discover that interest, you can respond very easily. But if somebody loves collecting stamps and you have no interest in collecting stamps, it would be wrong to create an interest in stamps to build the relationship. That would be manipulative and, as you said, come back to networking, contrived. But if we understand a person for long enough, there will be areas of shared interest, and the shared interest, what the shared interest does, it gives us a vocabulary, it gives us a framework, it gives us things to talk about with that person. And as we talk to that person about those things, we become relaxed and comfortable. Because silence, actually, with somebody you don't know, actually can be quite an uncomfortable thing. But if you're building a relationship with somebody, it's why the British, I don't know if you've spotted this about the British, we love to talk about the weather. I was saying to them in Ghana last week, I said to them, if you meet a British person and you're stuck what to talk about, just talk about the weather. British people say, too hot, too cold, too wet, too windy, too dry, too this, too that, too frosty. I mean, they just talk about the weather. And you can break the ice. The weather is the ultimate British icebreaker in conversation. But what happens when you meet somebody for the first time and you immediately have something to talk to them about, it just kind of, you feel comfortable in their company. And all of a sudden, you've moved on from talking about the weather and you're talking about family holidays. Or you've moved on from that and you're talking about what was on TV last night. And all of a sudden, you've got this rapport with the other person. And if I had more time, I'd love to unpack I've got a unique model about building interpersonal rapport with somebody. And, some of the things we've touched on in a very small way tonight, but there's a way that you can build that interaction with somebody. And a shared interest can give you a vocabulary to do that. So that's my long answer, but it's the same answer, yes. Okay. So I'm just looking at the time. I'm going to do the fourth feature, but I haven't got time to do it all because I'd like to finish at 9 o'clock. Is that all right with you? Can we go to 9 o'clock? Great. Okay. So the third feature. First feature, authenticity. Second feature, intentionality. Third feature, responsiveness. Fourth feature, resilience. The ability to keep on keeping on, to persevere whatever the odds against us. Let me ask a question. Do you